This is a video demonstrating how we move from circular trigonometry to function trigonometry. So first of all, what is circular trigonometry? It's the study of many right triangles formed as you sweep around the unit circle, which has a radius of 1. We tend to study the special right triangles the most. And so what's the use of that? Why do we do that? Because it's a periodic phenomenon. So what happens is we take the circle, we cut it, and we lay it as the x-axis. And since it's periodic, it keeps going. So as you do another lap, you continue down the x-axis. If you go in the negative direction, you're just revolving in the opposite way on the unit circle. And what we want to study is the graph of the sine and cosine ratio. Do the other ratios exist? Yes. We're not going to study those. Those will be for pre-calc. But we're going to study the fluctuations in the vertical side, which would be the graph of sine, because the opposite side is the vertical side, and the hypotenuse is 1. And so whenever you do the opposite over the hypotenuse, it's just the vertical side length. So let me put up the graph of sine, and you'll see. So focus on the vertical shifting. So I'll try to do this. Down to -1, up to 0, up to 1, down to 0, down to -1, back up to 0, up to 1, down to 0, down to -1, back up to 0, up to 1, down to 0, back down to -1, up to 0. You get the idea. That produces a wave, and this wave can be used to model periodic phenomena. Are all sine waves based on the unit circle? No. So sometimes the x-axis can be time, but they're useful because they model periodic phenomena. Sound waves are modeled with the sine function, so on and so forth. They have great use in science. The cosine function is really the same thing, just shifted off a little bit. So let me stop the sine. We'll just keep that up there and then show cosine. So the cosine is just the graph of the fluctuations of the adjacent side, because it's the adjacent side divided by 1, just like with sine, and that produces cosine. And so you can look at the fluctuations up to 1, down to 0, over to -1, back to 0, over to 1, back to 0, back down to -1, back to 0, so on and so forth. This is an action or motion idea, and most teachers miss this in the teaching of it, but this is where the graphs of sine and cosine come from. And that's why we needed to study a little bit of unit circle trig before we begin function trig.